"You were always a placeholder, Luna." He said it so quietly, I almost believed I'd misheard him. But then he raised his glass and tapped it lightly against hers. They smiled. She laughed. I didn't. I just stood there, watching the way her dress sparkled like a chandelier, catching light from every direction while mine just absorbed it. I looked at him for a second, expecting something, maybe a glance, a wince, a hint of shame. But Mark didn't flinch. He lifted his champagne again and kept smiling. Victoria rested her hand on his arm like it had always belonged there. It hadn't. It didn't. But no one else in the room seemed to notice or care. That was the moment I stopped being his wife. Not legally, not officially, but emotionally. It was done. And the worst part was, he didn't even look at me when he said it. I was 5 feet away, 5 years too late. My name is Luna James. I'm 42 years old. I live in San Diego. And until that night, I thought I was married. I'm a graphic designer by trade, freelance now. I used to design book covers, romance, thrillers, family memoirs. Funny how I spent years wrapping up other people's stories while mine quietly unraveled behind the scenes. We were at a gala, one of those high-gloss fundraisers Mark used to drag me to before he started arriving without me. He said it was for his firm's new charity branch, scholarships for underprivileged finance interns. Something polished, something that looked good in pictures. Everything Mark did lately was about pictures. Victoria Hall was the kind of woman whose name carried the same weight as her jewelry. Elegant, poised, not a strand of hair out of place. She was the guest of honor that night. But it was clear she wasn't just a guest. She was the main event. For him. I'd asked him weeks ago, straight out, if there was someone else. He smiled like I'd asked him if we were out of milk. "You're imagining things, Lou," he said, brushing past me. He always did that, shrinking things down until they felt silly. But standing there, clutching my glass like a lifeline, watching them whisper and lean in, I realized I hadn't imagined anything. I had ignored it. That was different. The lights above us were warm, dimmed just enough to make everyone look like a magazine spread. The kind of lighting that hides exhaustion but not distance. I could see every inch of space he'd created between us. Not just across the ballroom, but over years. Little absences, forgotten texts, half answers. And now, this. A waiter passed by and paused near me, unsure. "Ma'am, would you mind just stepping slightly to the left? Miss Hall would like a clean background for the photo." He said it softly, but I still felt it in my stomach. A clean background, like I was clutter, like I didn't belong in the frame anymore. I stepped aside. Mark didn't look up. I didn't say a word. I just watched the photographer take their picture, her hand still on his chest, his head tilted slightly toward hers. They looked perfect. But perfect doesn't mean honest. I turned my face away before the flash hit. I couldn't give them that image, not with me in it. I walked toward the back, past the rows of silent auction baskets and decorative centerpieces. Everything smelled like lilacs and money. My heels clicked against the marble floor like a metronome, steady, measured. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I just moved. I ended up near the coat check, where no one was talking about investment portfolios or private equity. Just two teenagers scrolling their phones and a security guard pretending not to listen. I sat on the bench, cold leather. My hands shook a little, but not from rage. It was something quieter. The kind of cold you feel in your ribs when you realize someone's already replaced you in their head, and now they're just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. I checked my phone. Nothing from Mark. Not even a "where are you?" Of course not. I used to be the one who texted first, who made sure he ate, who reminded him to call his mother. Now I couldn't even remember the last time he asked me how I was. It's strange how quickly you can go from being someone's everything to being their inconvenience. I stood up slowly, smoothed my dress, and started walking again, this time toward the exit. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I passed the main ballroom one last time. Just as I reached the far end of the corridor, I saw Mark lean toward Victoria. She smiled, bright and hungry. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet envelope. He handed it to her. She looked surprised, then pleased. She slid it into her clutch like it was a promise. I stopped walking. There was something about that envelope. I'd seen them before. Legal documents, not a gift, not a card, something binding. I didn't go back to ask. I already knew. I stood there, realizing I wasn't just being left. I was being replaced like old furniture. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, stay with me. This story isn't just mine. I walked out into the night air, heels echoing on stone. The valet glanced at me, then at the door behind me, confused. I didn't explain. The wind lifted the hem of my dress as I stepped to the curb. My breath fogged a little, though it wasn't cold enough for that. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I'd finally stopped pretending I was still part of his world. And maybe that was the beginning. I'm tired, Luna. Can we just eat without dissecting everything tonight? That was 3 weeks before the gala. Just a Tuesday dinner. 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine, 2 people who used to know how to fill the silence between bites. I'd asked him about his phone, which kept buzzing under his napkin. I wasn't accusing, I just asked. He didn't look up. He just cut his salmon and said it like a sigh. Not irritated, not defensive, just finished. I remember the way his fork scraped the plate. That sound stuck with me longer than his words. Because by then, the words didn't mean much anymore. What hurt was how comfortable he'd become ignoring me. That night, I washed the dishes slowly. He didn't offer to help. He used to, even when he was tired. Especially when he was tired. I used to tell myself marriage wasn't supposed to be exciting all the time. That quiet meant stability, not distance. But it wasn't quiet. It was hollow. The next morning, he left early for a client breakfast. He didn't kiss my cheek. He didn't even say goodbye. I started noticing small things after that. The way he lingered in the mirror. The new cologne, peppery and sharp. Not the warm sandalwood I used to buy him. He stopped wearing his wedding ring. Said it was uncomfortable when typing. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Then there were the photos. It started with someone tagging him at a networking event. I wasn't in the picture. Victoria was. A soft hand on his shoulder. A smile that tilted toward possessive. She's just a donor, he told me. Big investor in the nonprofit arm. We're all trying to make her feel included. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Because believing meant I didn't have to ask harder questions. But then came the second photo. This time Victoria wasn't in the background. She was right next to him, front and center, like she belonged there. She wore a necklace I'd never seen before. Diamond, not small. Mark didn't wear his ring in that photo either. That night, I asked him where he'd been. He said there was an after-dinner meeting with board members. I asked if Victoria was there. He looked at me like I'd asked something embarrassing. Luna, she's just part of the fundraising committee. Don't do this. Then he poured himself a scotch and turned on the TV. I didn't bring it up again. I couldn't handle the way he made me feel small for even noticing. It was easier to disappear quietly than to be dismissed loudly. One morning, I found the receipt. It was in the back pocket of his trousers, bundled with dry cleaning slips. A high-end boutique. One item. White gold necklace with pave diamonds. The date matched the night of the second photo. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding it like it might burn through my hand. I didn't confront him. Not then, not yet. There was still a part of me clinging to the timeline we'd built. 15 years together, a shared mortgage, Sunday routines, inside jokes that hadn't been spoken in months. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was a reason. Maybe he'd explain. But he never did, and I stopped asking. The week before the gala, he told me there were too many things on his plate and asked if I'd mind skipping it this year. It'll be late and crowded and mostly firm people anyway. I told him I'd think about it. I knew I'd go. Not to see him, just to see the truth. Now standing in our walk-in closet, I stared at the spot where his tux used to hang. The empty hanger swayed slightly from when I opened the door, like it still remembered weight. He never brought it back from the cleaner. He never planned to. I sat on the carpet, cross-legged, staring into the stillness of fabric and shoes and dust lines. My hands trembled, not from grief, but from recognition. He was gone. He just left the formalities behind. A part of me wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I stood, walked into his office, and stared at the desk he never truly let me touch. The drawers were neat, predictable, too predictable. Behind a stack of travel receipts and a brochure for luxury retirement homes, ones I'd never heard him mention, I found it, a manila folder, tucked under a magazine like it had been forgotten. But it hadn't been forgotten. It had been hidden. I pulled it out. No label. Just crisp edges and a faint scent of toner. Inside, 10 neatly typed pages. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My name, his name, our address, listed assets, separate properties, notes on equitable distribution. It was unsigned, undated, but prepared. He'd already planned it. He just hadn't delivered it. I sank into his desk chair, the one that always leaned a little too far back, and stared at the legal words written about a life I was still living. His handwriting was on the margins. Notes, edits, suggestions for a cleaner transition. He wasn't leaving me. He had already left. I just hadn't caught up yet. I held the folder in my lap, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. Not because of what it said, but because of what it confirmed. He didn't forget to love me. He just stopped thinking I mattered. And that was worse. He listed the beach house as separate property. I read the sentence twice, then a third time, as if maybe I'd misunderstood the language. But there it was, clean, kaiwat legal. We didn't even own a beach house. Or at least I didn't know we did. The draft was long, impersonal, and typed in a font that made it feel less human, like the end of a marriage could be laid out with numbered clauses and bullet points. Paragraph 5, subsection B. Spouse shall retain no interest in the property located in... I traced the address with my fingertip. A condo in Laguna, bought 2 years ago. I'd never been there. My name didn't appear until page 4, next to things like joint mortgage responsibility, utilities, and non-liable party and investment accounts. Not a single asset tied to me. Not one. I wasn't part of the future. I was the leftover maintenance plan. Mark always handled the money. That was the arrangement. He said I didn't need to worry about those things, that I should focus on my art, on the house, on staying centered. He made it sound like a kindness, like freedom. It's easier this way, he'd say when I asked about bank statements or tax forms. I've got it covered. I believed him, not because I was naive, but because I loved him. And that, I think, is what made this all so quiet, so precise. Over the years, he'd slowly changed the locks, not on doors, but on information, on access, on power. I remembered when we bought the house. We sat at the closing table, his hand resting on mine, and he told the realtor, "She wants her name on it too." I smiled like it meant something permanent. But that was over a decade ago. Since then, the only things in my name were the monthly bills and my freelance software subscriptions. I thought that was enough. I thought trust was currency. I didn't realize trust without transparency was just a velvet blindfold. I called Nita the next morning. She picked up on the second ring. "What happened?" she asked. Not with alarm, but certainty. That's the thing about old friends. They know the tone. "I found something," I said. "A draft. Of a divorce. It's done. He's done." Her voice went quiet. "Bring it over." I printed every page. Black and white. No highlighting, no annotations. Just the plain reality. Nita laid the pages out across her kitchen table, like a puzzle she already knew the answer to. Her apartment was warm, lived in. A dish towel over the oven handle, succulents on the sill. It smelled like strong coffee and almond soap. She didn't say anything for a while, just read. When she finally looked up, her eyes didn't flinch. "He's burying you financially." "I know." "No," she said flatly. "You don't. You think this is just about the house. It's not. He's moved almost everything under his name. He's probably been doing it for years." I looked at the papers again, now covered in her notes. "I let him," I whispered. "You trusted him. That's not the same thing." "I should have." "No," she cut in. "He should have. That's where this starts." I let her words sit. She poured coffee into a mug and slid it toward me. I wrapped my hands around it. not because I wanted to drink it, but because I didn't know what to do with my fingers. You need a lawyer, she said. Now. I don't know if I'm ready to fight. It's not a fight, it's a rescue. I looked at her, really looked. Her strength wasn't loud. It was steady, like a railing you didn't realize you'd been leaning on until your grip tightened. I'm still trying to make sense of it, I said. There's a part of me that keeps hoping this is some draft, some maybe, that he's still deciding. She reached across the table and placed a finger on the word engagement. My eyes followed hers. Victoria's social media post. Just 2 days old. The ring was massive, oval cut, platinum. Mark's hand was in the frame. His caption read, "Here's to the next chapter." I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. He didn't call. He didn't warn me. He didn't care if I found out this way. He knew I would. And he wanted me to. Because nothing says finality like making it public before it's personal. I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was stillness. I picked up the draft again, smoother now under my palm. The words didn't sting anymore. They just sat there, quiet, obvious. "This is what he's written for me," I said out loud. "This is the story he wants to tell." Nita didn't speak. She didn't need to. I pulled out my phone, Googled his name, searched through 2 pages of law firms. I wanted someone with sharp eyes and soft hands, someone who wouldn't let me drown in legal terms or guilt. I found him, David Moresby, clean record, discreet reputation, quiet but relentless. I read 3 testimonials before I sent the email, attached the draft, typed 1 sentence. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize for the timing, just, "Can you review this? I don't know where to start." I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. 10 minutes later, my screen lit up. David Moresby. Subject line, I read it. Body, call me tonight. He moved how much? David didn't blink. He just turned the page toward me, tapped twice near the highlighted line, then folded his hands on the desk. 628,000 over the last 15 months, mostly transferred to a joint account, his and Victoria Hall. The numbers didn't look real. They looked like someone else's life. Not mine, not ours. He said our retirement was locked in. David nodded slowly. It was, until he stopped the auto contributions last fall, then quietly dissolved your joint fund 2 months later. It's legal if both parties agree, or if one doesn't notice. I stared at the edge of his desk, tracing the grain of the wood with my eyes. He told me not to worry about the paperwork. David didn't say anything. I cleared my throat. Can he do this to me legally? Not if you fight back. The words were calm, no drama, just fact. I nodded, but the motion felt disconnected from my body, like it belonged to someone braver. "I'm not angry yet," I said quietly. "That's the strange part. You're grieving," he said. "That comes first." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Grief wasn't loud. It was slow, heavy. It made the room feel smaller. David leaned back. "Victoria has resources. Private counsel. This won't be simple." I looked him in the eye. "I don't need simple. I just need real." He gave a single nod. "Then we'll file a countersuit. Asset concealment. Marital fraud. Quietly. We don't make noise. We make records." His certainty was steadying. Not aggressive, just clear. He slid a form across the desk. "This authorizes me to request full financial disclosures. Subpoenas come next." I signed it. And in that moment, something shifted. Not strength, not yet, but direction. When I got home, the living room smelled like lavender and dust. I left the lights off. I wanted the stillness. I placed my keys in the dish. My fingers brushed the folded papers I'd left on the side table. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. It rang again. I opened the door. Mark stood there, casual in a blue jacket he used to wear to Sunday brunch. His mouth was set, unreadable. "You weren't supposed to see that draft yet," he said. I looked at him, and for the first time he felt like a stranger holding my last name. You weren't ambitious, Luna. You were comfortable. He said it like he was offering me a compliment, like I should thank him for pointing it out. I didn't answer right away. I stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other holding a mug I hadn't touched since the coffee cooled. He'd let himself in with the spare key. The one I forgot was still taped under the potted fern. You didn't want more, he added, stepping past me like it was still his house. Not really. You liked things small. I followed him into the kitchen. He looked around like he expected something to be different. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just making sure it hadn't changed without him. You stopped being exciting, he said, pulling out a stool. There it was, the Trinity. Not ambitious, not hungry, not exciting. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even sound angry, just tired of holding a mask. You mean I stopped chasing you around while you played bachelor in a married man's wardrobe? That made him look up. He didn't answer. I was building something here, I said. You just didn't see it because it wasn't centered around you. He shook his head, lips tight. You could have done more. You settled. You got comfortable in my success. That one landed sharp. I felt it in my chest before it reached my throat. I got comfortable believing my marriage was real, I said softly. He rolled his eyes and pushed back the stool. Don't do that. Don't twist it. I set the mug down, slow and quiet. You forgot who I was before I loved you, Mark. That stopped him. Before the house, before the accounts and dinners and your name on the glass. I was still someone. He just chose not to remember. He started to speak again, then didn't. He looked at me, but not really. His gaze hovered somewhere near my shoulder. Maybe guilt, maybe calculation. Either way, it didn't reach his eyes. You already filed? He asked, nodding toward the hallway where the office door was cracked open. I countered, his mouth flattened. You realize this will get messy. It's already messy. You're just not used to seeing the stain. Silence stretched between us like a thread. He didn't pull it. He didn't have to. He left it hanging so I could feel the tension alone. He adjusted his jacket, the same one from the gala. I stepped aside. He didn't say goodbye, just walked out like he expected the door to close itself. I waited until the sound of his car faded before I moved. I sat down slowly and let the quiet settle. It didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, like someone had scraped out the center of my life with a spoon and left me to smooth the edges. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because crying still felt like connection. And I had none left for him. My phone buzzed. David. Subpoena went through, he said. We have access. I stood, one hand on the counter, the other bracing the ache behind my ribs. And? I found something, he said. You're going to want to sit down. I didn't. There's a withdrawal from your inheritance trust. 6 months ago. It was transferred out of the custodial fund you thought was locked. That account wasn't even listed in the divorce draft. It was hidden, deliberately. My voice came out dry. How much? 50,000. Then another 25 2 weeks later. It was rerouted into a shell account. Guess who's a co-signer? I didn't answer. I already knew. Victoria. He thought he could erase me with a single signature. But what would you do if the truth you uncovered was worse than the betrayal itself? I looked around my kitchen. Everything I had built quietly, in love, in trust, in loyalty, touched by hands that never asked. He wasn't just leaving, he was stealing. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. What do we do next? David didn't hesitate. We make it all visible. I thought it was for emergencies. That's what I told David when he asked about the trust fund. My grandmother left it for me when I was 22. A safety net. I never touched it. Not when I got laid off. Not when we renovated the kitchen. Not even when Mark said things were tight during tax season. He said we'd be fine. He always said that. I signed the access forms without hesitation. I remember the day. Rushed, in between errands. He handed me a folder and said, "It's just to make things easier." I didn't read the fine print. I didn't think I had to. I trusted him. And now that trust is sitting in an account I can't reach. One that has Victoria Hall listed as a co-signer. David didn't dramatize it. He just laid out the numbers, the dates, the movement of money. This isn't a technical error, he said. It was a plan. It wasn't just money. It was history. It was the savings my grandmother stitched together from decades of nursing shifts and coupon books. She wrote me a letter when she opened that account. I still have it in a drawer. Luna, use this when you need it the most. Let it protect you. But I didn't use it. Mark did. To protect someone else. I walked through the apartment like I was visiting a place I used to live. The couch felt unfamiliar. The wedding photo on the bookshelf looked like strangers had posed for it. Even the sound of the refrigerator humming felt too loud. I opened our bedroom closet and stared at the row of suits still hanging where he left them. Dry cleaned, neatly spaced. Like he thought he might still need them here. I touched the sleeve of the navy one, the one he wore to our 10th anniversary dinner. That night, he'd ordered a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce and toasted to surviving the grind. I'd laughed, thinking it meant something tender. Now I realized it meant he'd already started checking out. I stood in the center of the room and tried to find something, anything, that still felt like mine. Even the rug felt too clean, like it had been waiting for new footprints. He didn't just leave me. He used me. He used my past, my name, my bloodline. And he handed it to someone else with a ribbon on it. David called again. His voice was steady. We have enough to go public. You decide how we use it, court or leverage. I didn't answer right away. I just looked around the life I'd spent years building, wondering what it would feel like to finally be seen again, without him in the frame. I'm not writing to destroy you. That's how I started the letter. I stared at the words on the screen for a long time before I printed them. They didn't feel cruel. They felt clean. I didn't use names. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I just laid out the dates, the numbers, the transfers, a paper trail without commentary. I copied the bank statements David highlighted, the ones with my trust account drained in slow, silent increments. I included the retirement freeze, the property acquisitions, the overlapping timelines, no return address, no signature, just a single line at the bottom. In case you want to know what you're marrying into. I folded everything neatly, sealed the envelope, and wrote her name in careful print. Victoria Hall. That was all it needed. The rest would find her. I dropped it in a blue mailbox on a quiet corner. No one was around. It was early enough that even the wind didn't bother showing up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. I didn't want revenge. Not then. What I wanted was light. I wanted the lie to be less comfortable, less easy to wear in public. Days passed. Silence. Then a shift. Victoria posted a photo, a blurry skyline, captioned, "Turns out, diamonds can be dirty. No ring, no hand-holding, no mark." 2 days later, his account went quiet. No updates, no appearances, no curated snapshots of a perfect new life. And still, I said nothing. David called late afternoon. His voice sounded amused beneath the calm. Mark's lawyers just reached out. They want to settle quietly. No trial, no discovery, no press. I looked at the empty tea mug in my hand, then out the window at the sky, folding into dusk. They're afraid of what might come next, he added. So was I, but not in the way he meant. I think we should take the offer, David. And waited, but I didn't respond. He repeated it, slower this time. It's generous, no press, no hearing, no risk. I looked out the window. The light hit the dining table just right, casting long shadows across the hardwood. That table had hosted birthdays, arguments, apologies. It had held so many versions of us, and I'd stayed quiet through all of them. No, I said finally. He gets silence from me, or he gets court, not both. David didn't argue. Okay. That was all I needed. Something inside me had shifted, not snapped, just turned. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was awake. For years, I'd told myself that kindness would protect me, that staying calm, staying small, staying helpful would count for something. But all it did was make me easier to erase. Now I understood something I hadn't before. Silence, in the wrong hands, is permission. This time, I was choosing mine carefully. 3 days later, I found the letter in the mailbox. No envelope markings, no return address. Just my name on the front in his handwriting. Please don't do this. 6 words. Not even signed. He didn't say sorry. He didn't explain. He didn't even ask how I was. He just didn't want the consequences. I stood over the sink, read it once, then twice. Then I lit a match and watched it curl into smoke. When it was nothing but black edges and ash, I rinsed the sink clean and opened the window. The next morning, David called again. Court date's confirmed, he said. 30 days out. I could hear him smiling on the other end. Make sure you show up looking like the woman he didn't deserve. This wasn't included in discovery, the judge said. David didn't flinch. It came from a third party, Your Honor. Verified. We have the account numbers and timestamps. The courtroom, already quiet, shifted into something colder, like everyone realized at the same moment that Mark hadn't just been careless. He'd been deliberate. The judge adjusted his glasses. Who submitted this? Victoria's lawyer stood. My client. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. She hadn't returned since she walked out that day. But someone from her world had stayed. Someone who didn't want her name tied to whatever else Mark had buried. David handed over a folder, clean and labeled. No theatrics. Just numbers and names. Wire transfers. A pattern. This trail leads to an offshore nest of private investment shelters. Cayman Islands, Romania. One routed briefly through a Hong Kong shell registered under a defunct nonprofit. The judge's expression didn't change, but his pen stopped moving. David continued, calm and steady. All traced to the same original account. One Mark James shares exclusively with his business partner. None of these were disclosed in marital filings or tax declarations. Mark shifted for the first time. His lawyer leaned in, whispered something, then stopped mid-sentence when Mark stiffened. It was the first time I'd seen him sweat. Not figuratively, literally. A bead formed near his temple. He brushed it away quickly, but not before I saw the edge of his control falter. That's when I realized how much he'd gotten away with simply because people believed he was too polished to lie. And I used to be one of them. The judge closed the folder and looked down at the table like he was reading the wood grain. I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all listed financial assets, he said. Effective today, personal and business, until this is sorted. Mark's lawyer stood. Your Honor. The judge didn't lift his eyes. Sit down, counselor. I didn't smile. There was no part of this that felt like victory. Just air where pressure used to live. It wasn't about ruining him. It was about no longer protecting him. I'd done that for years. Held his secrets. Softened the truths. Smiled in rooms where I knew nothing about what we actually owned or owed. I had wrapped my silence around him like a coat he didn't even thank me for wearing. But now the coat was gone. The judge rose, signaling recess. We reconvene after records review. Counsel, you'll be notified. Mark didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead like the world was still playing by his rules. But I could feel the panic in him. A man who was used to managing optics, now trapped inside a frame he didn't control. Outside the courtroom, the sun hit hard, sharp and bright. David walked beside me but didn't say anything. He didn't need to. My phone buzzed once, a text from Nita. Just saw the news. You okay? I typed back, still breathing. He's not. Later that night, I stood by the kitchen window with the TV playing low behind me. Some finance report, muted. Background noise. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Mark James removed from board of James and Brighton Capital, effective immediately. No interviews, no public statement. Just a line buried under ticker updates. They'd cut him loose. I stood still, one hand resting on the counter, watching the words fade like fog from glass. No satisfaction, no applause, just truth finally stepping out into daylight. And the silence it left behind? It felt like mine now, for the first time. He was gone, but the echo stayed. Not the sound of his voice. He hadn't spoken to me in weeks. Not even the rhythm of his footsteps across the hall. That left a long time ago. What remained was subtler. Empty hangers. The imprint on his side of the mattress. The drawer that didn't need to be opened anymore. But I wasn't lonely. The quiet felt different now. Less like abandonment. More like a held breath finally released. I started with the living room. I moved the furniture. Not dramatically. just enough to remind myself it belonged to me now. I donated the cold leather chair he loved and replaced it with something soft, with curved arms and pale fabric. Something gentle. I filled the space with light, opened the windows, let the air move through. Then I painted. For the first time in years, I opened my old supply bin and pulled out a canvas. I didn't plan anything. I didn't sketch or mix deliberately. I just let my hands move. Blues, ochres, hints of rose where the brush lingered too long. It wasn't art for anyone but me. I didn't need it to hang or sell or prove anything. It just needed to exist. I cooked small meals, nothing extravagant, just enough for one. I learned to eat without rushing, without asking how his day was, without waiting for him to look up from his phone and nod like he was listening. And one evening, without warning, I laughed. Nita had come over with a bottle of something dry and cheap, and we sat on the floor eating takeout straight from the cartons. She told a story about her office printer catching fire mid-shift, and I laughed so hard I had to set my food down. It surprised me, the sound of it, the way it rolled out of my mouth without hesitation. Grief doesn't always leave a gap. Sometimes it clears space. Later that night, I pulled a box from the closet, the one labeled Nana. Inside were her old journals. Brown leather, edges curled, pages filled with her looping cursive. Some pages were grocery lists. Others were letters never sent. And some, quiet, steady entries about strength. January 2nd. Strength is not the absence of softness. It is the discipline to remain gentle in a world that punishes it. April 14th. You don't need to be remembered by everyone. Just don't forget yourself. I ran my fingers over her handwriting. She had lived through loss, too, through betrayal and survival, and the long work of reclaiming dignity. She never raised her voice, but she never gave it away either. I thought about all the years I'd whispered myself smaller, just to keep the peace. And now, I could hear myself again. Peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the return of self. That's what Nana knew. I left the journal open on the nightstand, the entry dated July 6th staring back at me. Forgiveness is optional. Clarity is not. I sat by the window and watched the sky fold itself into dusk. The shadows softened against the street lamp outside. No music played, no background noise. Just the soft hum of a world that kept spinning, even when mine had stopped. I didn't need to rewind it anymore. I was in no rush to speed it up. I was right where I needed to be. Then the doorbell rang. Just once, sharp, brief, final. I stood slowly, more curious than startled. When I opened the door, there was no one there. Just a white envelope tucked neatly between the screen and the frame. No name on the front, no return address. But I knew the handwriting, Victoria. And suddenly, the echo shifted again. I should have asked more questions. That's the first line, scrawled in blue ink, slanted slightly right, just like every Christmas card she used to send, Victoria's handwriting. The letter wasn't long, a single page, folded twice, no envelope glue, no signature flourish, just her words. I didn't know everything, not then. Maybe I didn't want to, but I know now. No apology, no dramatics, no weepy confessional about being lied to, just truth, plain, measured, surgical. She said she found the discrepancies herself. Mark had been sloppy, or maybe just confident she wouldn't look. He let me believe you were the problem, she wrote, that you were cold, controlling, distant. I read that sentence 3 times. It didn't sting the way it used to. I didn't feel exposed or misunderstood, just confirmed. He said you resented his success, that you envied how happy we were. She added a note in parentheses after that. Happy people don't send wires to the Caymans. That part almost made me smile. Almost. She wasn't trying to redeem herself. That much was clear. She never claimed innocence, never asked for understanding, just distance. I'm walking away, she wrote, not from guilt, from delusion. I gave up too much pretending he was worth holding on to. There was something devastating about how ordinary her sentences sounded, like she was describing a train schedule, a grocery list, the final invoice of a life she didn't want anymore. Then came the part I didn't expect. You never seemed weak, Luna. I froze. You just looked tired of carrying everything. I put the letter down and exhaled so slowly it felt like releasing a decade. Tired. That was the word. Not bitter, not damaged, not defeated. Just tired. Tired of smoothing over his sharp edges. Tired of being the one who explained away silence, who filled in the blanks when he left them too wide. Tired of adjusting my voice, my schedule, my smile. Tired of shrinking. I let the paper rest on my lap and leaned back into the chair. The old one with the wooden arms and the worn cushion. The one he always said was too stiff. I kept it. Because it didn't try to be soft for anyone. I didn't cry. I didn't call Nita. I didn't pour a glass of anything. I just sat there, in the quiet, and let my spine realign itself with the truth. Victoria saw him now. Not the version he sold her. Not the charm he wore like cologne. The man who measured loyalty by silence. I folded the letter along its original creases and walked it to the filing cabinet. I didn't shred it. I didn't burn it. I filed it away, under closure, and then I made tea. The kettle hissed gently behind me as I stared out the kitchen window. The same view I'd had for 18 years. The neighbor's garden, the cracked sidewalk, the maple tree that never quite turned red in the fall. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't standing in it the same way. I poured the water, added the bag, and carried the mug back to the window. I didn't need to sit, just stand, just breathe. My phone buzzed on the counter. David. I answered without thinking. The judge signed off. His voice was quiet, not tentative, just respectful. All terms are final. The ruling stands. My hand tightened slightly around the mug, not out of fear, not even relief, just gravity. Thank you, I said. He paused. You okay? I looked out at the tree again. A single red leaf clung to a high branch, shivering in the breeze. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm free. You should be here, Nita said, holding the phone like it still had heat in it. It's historic. I stirred my paintbrush in the jar of cloudy water and looked out at the tide. No, I shouldn't. The wind tugged at my shirt sleeves. The sun was behind clouds, soft and diffused, the kind of light that didn't demand anything from me. The canvas in front of me was half finished. A suggestion of shoreline, the start of a lone figure in the distance. I didn't know who she was yet. Maybe me, maybe not. The courthouse was 90 minutes away. The same building where I'd sat for 3 days straight in a wooden chair that made my hips ache. The same courtroom where my silence was dissected, where my spreadsheets were used as shields. But I wasn't there today. I didn't need to be. I already knew how it ended. Full property rights, clean title, asset reimbursement. Public statement issued by the court to clear my name from all of Mark's transactions, his charitable foundations, his offshore attempts at disappearing consequences. It was all signed this morning. I'd gotten the call before breakfast. David's voice was steady, almost quiet with the weight of it. You're untethered now, he said. Fully. He paused, then added, Mark's facing additional review. That part didn't feel like justice, just gravity catching up. The brush made soft, circular strokes in the sand-colored paint. I leaned in and tapped it gently into the curve of the waves. The lines didn't need to be perfect. Nothing did anymore. Mark's name wasn't being whispered in admiration now. I'd overheard someone at the grocery store say, he used to run that firm downtown, didn't he? Then a shrug. Think they're investigating him. Not a single drop of sympathy in it. No leaning in, no hush. Just a man fading out of relevance. He always said he hated stillness. Said it made people weak. I used to believe that. Or maybe I just believed him. Because when someone repeats something long enough, especially in a voice that fills a room, it starts to feel like a law instead of an opinion. And when you're married to that voice, you start rewriting yourself just to match its volume. Now, stillness is the only place I can hear myself think. It doesn't echo. It doesn't accuse. It just exists. Like the tide, consistent, honest, impossible to argue with. I didn't always know how to sit in it. At first, stillness felt like failure. Like a pause was proof I hadn't done enough, hadn't fixed what broke. But now it feels like power. Stillness isn't silence, it's sovereignty. The sea didn't ask me for anything, didn't ask me to smile or explain or hurry up. It didn't remind me of deadlines or broken promises. It just breathed with me. I let it fill my chest without consequence. I took off my shoes, dug my heels into the cool sand, let the salt settle into my skin. The wind played with my hair, and for once, I didn't tuck it back. I just let it fall. Behind me, my phone buzzed again. The vibration was soft, like it knew it didn't hold power over me anymore. I turned it over on the bench and saw Nita's name light up the screen. A message preview hovered like a question I hadn't asked. They want to interview you for a piece on financial injustice survivors. Women who stayed too long, women who said nothing until they didn't. I stared at it for a while. The word survivor always made me flinch, like I just barely made it out, when in truth, I'd walked out on my own terms. Not crawling, not weeping, not pleading. I stood up, packed a bag, and didn't look back. That's not surviving. That's reclaiming. I hadn't survived. I'd reclaimed. Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. I let the screen dim and fall silent again. I dipped my brush into the blue. The canvas in front of me had been blank this morning. Now, the figure was starting to take shape. Shoulders back, chin lifted. No background, no frame. Just her, centered, unapologetically so. She didn't need a setting. She didn't need proof. She was the proof. I smiled. Let the world ask questions. Let them wonder what happened. Let them replay their assumptions and turn them into gossip. I didn't need to explain. Not anymore. She never even said his name. That was the first comment I read under the interview. It stopped me. Not because it surprised me, but because it landed so cleanly, so precisely. Like someone had listened, really listened, and understood the choice I made. It was late when it aired. Nita sent me the link with a string of fire emojis and a heart, but I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, sat with it in both hands. The steam rising into my face felt grounding, like I needed to be warmed before hearing myself speak. I think part of me didn't want to see it at all. I already knew what I said. I remembered how it felt, how my hands stayed steady, how I didn't blink too much, how I didn't apologize. Then I clicked play. There I was, sitting in a quiet studio, hands folded in my lap, eyes level. I looked calm, older maybe, or just finally stripped of the practiced softness I used to wear like a uniform. There was no tilt to my voice, no nervous laugh to smooth the edges, just me, shaped by everything I'd once been asked to carry, but no longer crushed by it. The reporter asked the questions gently, no digging, just air and space. I noticed how she waited, really waited, after each question, like she respected the space between breath and answer. Did you ever think this would happen to you? Such a simple question, but behind it, 1,000 assumptions. I'd smiled when she asked, a small one, not out of politeness, but clarity. No, I said, but not because I thought I was safe, because I thought I was responsible. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and I knew it hit the way I meant it to. I didn't need to explain further. Anyone who knew, really knew, would hear the whole story in that one sentence. The interview went on. The questions weren't about him. They were about me, about the shift that happens when you stop trying to make someone better and start making yourself whole. I answered each one like I was sitting across from a friend, not an audience. I didn't perform. I didn't defend. I didn't adjust my tone to make it easier to hear. It was strange. Watching myself be that woman, strange and comforting. She didn't need permission. She didn't need to be palatable. She didn't need to carry the weight of someone else's redemption arc. After it ended, I didn't check the comments right away. I closed my laptop, stepped outside. The air was cool again. Not cold, just fresh, cleansing, like something had opened. When I came back in, The messages had started from strangers, from women I'd never meet. Some told me they cried. Some told me they laughed. Some said they'd played the interview while folding laundry or feeding a baby or sitting in traffic. And something inside them settled. I thought I was the only one. I didn't know you could leave and still be kind. My daughter heard your voice and said, "She sounds like she means it." Those messages felt like closure, but not just mine, theirs too. A web of women unspooling from shame and reconnecting with sound. I thought about replying to Nita, telling her thank you, telling her that word, survivor, still didn't feel right. But maybe that's because we've been using it wrong. I don't want to be remembered as someone who escaped. I want to be remembered as someone who returned to herself. I walked back to the canvas and picked up my brush again, added a shadow beneath the woman's jaw. Not to darken her, but to ground her, to give her weight. She deserved that. Realness, dimension. She wasn't a symbol, she was someone. I wasn't painting an idea. I was painting a mirror. Tomorrow, maybe I'll say yes to the second interview plus you. Or maybe I won't. I've learned the power of choice, the strength in pause, and the grace in simply not answering until you feel like it. He always said he hated stillness, said it made people weak. I used to believe that. Or maybe I just believed him. Now stillness is the only place I can hear myself think. No, I said, without smiling. But I think I always knew I was disposable in his world. I just didn't want to believe it. She asked how long it took for me to see it clearly. Years. You don't notice the water rising until you're soaked through. I never once said Mark's name. I didn't need to. The names were never the point. The patterns were. The silences, the dismissals, the cold sentences behind closed doors that broke louder than any shout. He said I was good at budgeting, I told her. That I had a talent for making small things work. She tilted her head. That sounds like a compliment. It wasn't, I said. It was a warning. I was being prepped to carry the weight while he played generous. We sat in silence after that. It wasn't awkward, just real. People commented on that silence. They said it spoke louder than anything. One woman wrote, "She didn't cry. That's how I knew she meant every word." Another, "I feel like she's been sitting in my kitchen watching me pretend everything's fine." I closed the laptop slowly. Silence wasn't protection. I thought it was. I thought if I stayed quiet, played agreeable, absorbed what needed absorbing, that it would somehow shield me. But silence is a cage, not a guardrail. It keeps everything in, the shame, the second guessing, the weight of not being believed. When I spoke, I didn't roar. I didn't lash out. I just told the truth plainly. And the world listened. Women started tagging each other, sharing their own lines, their own cages. I used to apologize when he bought things with my name on the loan. She made me feel grateful for leftovers while she took my mother's house. I thought I was crazy for needing proof. Now I know I was just alone. Each comment felt like a crack in some shared wall. And it was strange. Not freeing, not instantly healing, but strangely steadying. I hadn't expected to feel steadier. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. Not my side, not my pain, not my worth. It just stood there, seen. Around noon, I walked down to the pier. The tide was out, the wind soft. I held the railing and stared at the horizon like it owed me nothing. And that was the beautiful part. It didn't. It didn't ask for more from me. Didn't need me to fix it, explain it, redeem it. The reporter had asked, "What do you think your silence cost you?" I'd paused, not for effect, just to hear the answer in my own chest before I gave it voice. "It cost me my voice," I said, "and a little piece of myself every time I let something slide." She nodded. "What would you say to other women who feel stuck?" I didn't look at the camera. I looked just past it, like I was talking to someone I loved. "You're not crazy," I said. "You're not weak. You're just tired of lifting things that shouldn't be yours to carry." Nita texted again a few hours later. "You're trending. People are calling you the most powerful interview of the year." I didn't know what to say to that. Power wasn't the goal. Peace was. Later that evening, while I was wiping down the kitchen counter, the doorbell rang. A plain brown box sat on the mat. No postage, no note, no return address. I carried it inside, light as air. Inside, nestled in tissue, was my grandmother's necklace, the real one. Not the cheap replacement I'd seen in court. Not the empty gesture Victoria wore. This one was old, warm, worn at the clasp. I held it in my palm like something sacred. Whoever returned it, they knew. And they wanted me to know they knew. I didn't cry. I just stood there, quiet, the weight of it curling gently into my fingers. I thought you sold this. That was all I said when I held it in my hand. The necklace, its chain soft with age, the clasp loose from decades of wear. I whispered the words into the empty room, not expecting a reply. But somehow, just saying it made the silence feel less heavy. I didn't put it back in the box. I didn't tuck it away like a relic. I placed it around my neck, slow, with both hands behind me like I'd done it 1,000 times. It sat just below my collarbone, right where it always used to rest on my grandmother. But this time, it didn't feel like memory. It felt like a beginning. The mirror didn't surprise me. I've spent enough time now facing things I didn't want to. My reflection looked back with a kind of quiet that wasn't silence. I traced the chain with my fingertip once. Then I turned away. On the table beside the window, the final court documents lay flat and uncreased. The language was stiff, polite, absolute. Judgment awarded. Fines listed. Reimbursements calculated down to the cent. There was a line I kept rereading. All financial entanglements formally severed. Such a clinical way of describing what it took me years to bleed for. I stood over the papers for a long time, not reading, just recognizing. He had tried to make me a footnote, a temporary fixture in his rising story. But those pages weren't about him anymore. They were about what it costs to stay invisible, and what it takes to stop. I carried them out back, lit a match, watched the flame catch at the corner and move inward. The pages curled like dry leaves, the ink twisted into smoke. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry. I just stood there, arms loose at my sides, feeling the warmth on my face. And I whispered it once, just loud enough for the wind to carry. I was never a placeholder. I was the whole frame. He never saw it. Not really. Mark always mistook stability for passivity. He thought patience meant permission, that my silence meant safety for him. It didn't. It meant I was waiting, watching, carrying, holding together everything he never noticed was cracked. And he never did notice, not really. Mark was the kind of man who saw only what was lit by the spotlight he believed belonged to him. I was the stagehand, the set, the silent cue behind the curtain making sure the act stayed clean. While he dazzled rooms, I patched emotional drywall behind the scenes. I knew when the bills were due. I knew when his mother needed a call. I remembered the dog's vet appointments, the lost birthdays of nieces and nephews he never bothered to know by name. I knew it all, because knowing it meant he didn't have to. And he liked it that way. Sometimes I'd wonder if he even realized how much I protected him, not just from consequences, but from discomfort. I smoothed every sharp edge, softened every fall. And when people praised his ease, his calm confidence, I would nod like I hadn't just stayed up late fixing what he'd dropped. But now I knew. I'd always been the one telling the story, even when I thought I was just surviving it. Inside, the house felt different. Same light, same walls, but lighter somehow, like something tight had been loosened and let go. It wasn't the kind of change you could name. It was a shift in weight, a change in the temperature of silence, a sense that I was finally breathing air that hadn't already passed through someone else's lungs. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled down the old sketchbook I'd stopped using years ago. The cover was dusty, but the spine held firm, like it had been waiting for me. The pages still smelled like charcoal and coffee, a scent I used to find grounding. I flipped past the empty ones, found the half-finished drawing I never let myself complete. It was a woman in a kitchen, one hand on a mug, the other resting on a windowsill. She wasn't sad, just still, paused, waiting to be named. That drawing had sat unfinished for years. I used to tell myself it was because I didn't know what her face should look like. But now I realized I did know. I just hadn't been ready to admit it. I picked up a pencil and gave her eyes, calm, present, slightly tired. Eyes that had seen too much and said too little. Eyes that knew silence intimately. Then I gave her a necklace. Not as decoration, but as weight. A mark of memory in return. Something that said, I'm still here. Then I signed the bottom with my full name. For the first time. I didn't even pause before I wrote it. The pencil moved like it remembered a rhythm my body had forgotten. And seeing my name there, in my own handwriting, not as an afterthought, but as a signature, it undid something in me. Later that night, I recorded the final entry. My voice didn't shake. I didn't practice or rewrite. I just pressed record and spoke. I didn't try to sound perfect. I didn't polish my words. I let them come like breath, natural and real. If this story found you in a moment of silence, I said, I hope it gave you permission to speak again. Thank you for walking with me. And if it meant something to you, stay. Like, subscribe or just share it with someone still learning to be loud. That last part wasn't just a request. It was a promise that silence doesn't win, that stories don't end in shame, that peace is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of truth. The necklace still hung warm on my chest. I stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, the boards cool beneath my feet. The night air was soft, touched with salt in early spring. The breeze moved through the trees like a sigh I didn't have to carry alone anymore. In the distance, someone was laughing, no one I knew, but it made me smile. Mark's name had become a warning now, passed between men in polished suits who once shook his hand. It wasn't said with respect anymore. It was a footnote, a caution, and I didn't need to be in the room to hear it. Let them whisper. I had nothing to explain. I never needed a megaphone, I just needed a moment. And now I had it. The real story had always been mine. Not the marriage, not the courtroom, not the betrayal. The story was survival, awakening, saying the thing you thought you'd swallow forever, and realizing your voice didn't vanish. It was just waiting. People still write to me. I read every message. Some thank me. Some pour out everything they've never said aloud. Some just leave one sentence. I see myself in you. And I reply every time with the same thing. I see you too. Because that's what we're all waiting for, isn't it? To be seen, to be heard, to be more than someone else's background character. Mark used to call me reliable. He meant it like a compliment. But what he really meant was, you'll keep showing up even when I don't. And I did. Until I didn't. That's the part that matters. Not that I stayed, but that I stopped. That I walked away not quietly, but clearly. That I made space for myself where there used to be only room for him. I don't know who sent the necklace back. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was someone watching from the edges all along. Maybe it was just the universe making one last correction. But it didn't matter. It came back. And I claimed it. Not as inheritance, not as apology, but as a beginning. And now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the woman who waited for permission. I see the one who stopped asking. Peace doesn't always come in silence. Sometimes it comes in the sound of your own voice,